Stop with the questions. Celebrate.
And then they say, is Donald Trump an intellectual? Trust me, I'm like a smart person. Yosemite's one of the wettest we've ever seen from the standpoint of water.
Mike Lindell's a conspiracy.
Well, you haven't. Person, woman, man, camera, TV. They said nobody gets it in order. It's actually not that easy, but for me it was easy.
Amazing. He can't sit down. He's got a burning in his butthole. He's got a fire. He's got a flame coming out of his butthole.
Big, massive dumps.
Oh, I have a term for that. I call it corporate communism.
Somebody sent me a thing this morning where they're talking about putting the vaccine into salad dressing.
You see, this is a simple meme that you would find on the internet, but this meme is very real.
You ain't seen nothing yet until you see the flaming butthole.
Putting us on our knees to China.
Now witness the firepower of this fully armed and operational battle station.
Please clap.
Around the nation, Waldorf Nation. Hey everybody, welcome to the show. We got a good one today. It's Tuesday, and it's going to be fun. We have Candace Owens, Moon Truther. That's a fun story. As somebody who enjoys space-based conspiracy theories, it's a little bit of a hobby. Yes, I happen to rail against conspiracy theories all the time. That's what a lot of their show has been dedicated to. But in reality, I love learning about them. I love hearing about the weirdo shit people believe. And so I'm going to address the moon landing. Moon landing conspiracies. Let's do it. Fun times. We also have conservatives going after Whoopi Goldberg. I'm going to weigh in on that because, look, as you know, I've had a little bit of a contentious relationship with Whoopi Goldberg. I've criticized her in the past. Will I defend her for saying something not only factually incorrect, but what some consider to be slightly anti-Semitic? Interesting. So what's the nuance about that? I'll get into it. I'll get into the details. We have Madison Cawthorn, of course, lying about Black Lives Matter. Shocker. We have Donald Trump is the shredder. I kid you not. That's a fun story, also pretty disastrous. Related to that, of course, we have voting machines. We are also going to talk about, let's see. Oh, yes. The greed of Big Pharma. What are they doing? Well, we'll get into the details. Interesting stuff. Also quite disastrous. So that's the breakdown of what we're going to talk about today. Please like and share the stream. Very important that you do so. Ravaging Wolverine. The moon is a deep state construct. Facts. No, it's okay. I'm not going to get into that because one of the games that I really enjoy playing has like a reveal of what the moon actually is within the game. I don't want to spoil it too much, but it's one that I play, and there is, the moon is a vessel, apparently, in that game universe, to allow people to escape the world. Fun. That's fun. And so it just makes me think, Candace Owens and all the different conspiracy theories about the moon. Hey, you don't know what game it is. So I'm not actually spoiling anything. But it you know, it's not a spoiler if I don't actually tell you what the game is. So I can get away with it. I can get away with it. I've got it. All right. So anyway, I don't know. It's a weird day already. So why don't we just get to the stories, okay? We'll do that. No more spoilers. All right. Huh? I'm such a dork. I laugh at my own funny sidebars. Or lower third, sorry. It's a lower third. Let's get into it. All right. Candace Owens recently revealed herself to be a moon landing truther. Interesting. So now, in a post to her Twitter account last Friday, and by the way, this is supposed to be having a more fun note, which is hilarious, Owens decided to have a little bit of fun by posting her favorite conspiracy theory. Interesting. So let's show that to you. Now for some lighthearted fun. What's one conspiracy theory, no matter what anyone says you believe is true? Mine is the moon landing in 1969 was completely faked. Just nothing about it makes sense. Especially NASA accidentally erasing the original footage. The biggest thing for me is fuel tank size, plus a live broadcast with audio from the moon. In 1969, I just cannot. Oh yeah, you know what? I'm with you. I can't either. I can't either. Wow. Just wow. Hey, Candace, here's a thought. Just because you might not understand something doesn't mean that it's fake. Doesn't mean that it didn't happen just because you're not smart enough to understand it. And I'm not trying to be derisive about that, by the way. I am saying that, like, you haven't went through the education. You don't know what physics and engineering can actually do and how to make these things work. Because you're a talking head on television, paid for by the right wing to say insanely stupid things. So yes, you're not going to understand that. That doesn't make it false. Now, again, we all know that Candace Owens is nowhere near to being a rocket scientist. All right? And look, and I say that because she has been constantly pushing vaccine disinformation, of course, because she also seems to not understand science and sell stuff on her website that could possibly turn you blue. That's the colloidal silver. So yeah, no. Hey, look, this is like me saying, I don't understand what's going inside of Candace Owens' head. Therefore, I don't believe there's a brain in there. I actually believe that there is, instead of a brain, just a pile of oatmeal. And if you don't contain it, if she doesn't wear earplugs, the oatmeal shall leak out of her ears. That's my favorite new conspiracy theory, that her brain has been replaced with oatmeal. All right, so no, but okay. Going on. So, you see, I don't believe it because, we didn't have the technology back then in 1969, but we had the technology to CGI the moon landing? No. No, we didn't. But what about the lost tapes? We got the lost moon tapes. Well, okay, there's a difference here, and that actually stirs up something interesting. Because look, there's a difference between losing actual physical tapes, or not really necessarily losing them, but like erasing them, and which is what NASA is saying. NASA says, yeah, we looked for them, and we think that some of the people just erased the footage and used it for something else. Now, why would you do that? And understand that it's within that ambiguity. of saying something like that, that's where these conspiracy theories are born, right? So now look. Oh, I'm sorry, not a CGA, set design. Now that's what it had to have been. No, of course. It's still a ridiculous theory, but true. But anyway, now as far as the lost footage is concerned, right? Again, NASA admitted that, yeah, we couldn't find some of the tape. However, that tape is the original tape. We still have all the footage. We still have all the data and information. We just don't have the original. So now, original being defined as directly recorded data transmitted from the moon. Now, according to NASA, an intensive search of archives and records concluded that the most likely scenario was that the program managers determined that there was no longer a need to keep the tapes, since all the video and data were recorded elsewhere, and that the tapes themselves were erased and reused. Now, does that make sense? Yeah, it actually does. It's a cost-saving measure. Now, again, the data on those tapes had already been relayed to what was then the Manned Spacecraft Center, now the Johnson Space Center, during the mission. So the video was not only recorded in different places, it was recorded, it's not only recorded there, but also in different places. So, in reality, there's no missing footage from Apollo 11. None. No missing footage from the moon landing. Sorry, Candace. No, not true at all. So now, of course, as a result of this, Twitter came in to dunk on her in some pretty fun ways. Now, first, more serious, the Xenored says, it literally couldn't be faked with the technology back then, and the Soviet Union, who was one of the most competitive times of the Cold War during the time of the moon landing, would have been the first to say that it wasn't real. But the moment they measured radio signals coming from the moon, you know, radio signals which travel through space and travel actually for a very, very long time. In fact, look, there are still radio signals that have emanated from this planet since like the 60s that are making their way into deep space. So, you know, radio signals. Now, the Russians, back in the day, they picked up those radio signals and realized, oh, they are coming from the moon. And of course, there's all the people who saw the rockets. There's the people who, you know, were actually there. The scientists that have worked there that have come out and said, yeah, no, we actually were on the moon. And so, again, it would really be difficult for this to be an actual conspiracy theory when you have so much evidence of people saying that, no, it actually literally happened. Even the people that were there. But anyway, there's more. Andrew Minotti says, my conspiracy theory is that you don't actually believe most of the things you say. You're just saying them to make money. Another person says, my conspiracy theory is that my mind invented Candace Owens at the tail end of a week-long Funyuns and bath salt bender. I hope you're okay. Seriously, because that's some serious stuff. All right. Another person adds, so what you're saying is America's signature geopolitical and scientific achievement of the 60s and 70s was a scam, and America wasn't really as great as you always tell us it was? All right. Another person says, this is Mark Perella on Twitter, Candace, I once had some respect for you, but no longer. It's funny how this is the line. This is the line. All right. I work for Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. Not only did the 6 moon landings happen, but the science that came from these events makes this tweet possible. Duna says, translation, I don't understand technology, and I have the belief that everyone who lived before me, basically living in the Middle Ages, which I also know nothing about, ergo they couldn't have done something I myself have no idea how it works. Lion says, this is amazing self-report. Thanks, Candace. Even her fans, as I mentioned. One person says, normally I'm with you, Candace, but on this, we're going to have to agree to disagree. Those are just some of the examples here. Let me just share my conspiracy. If we're going to share our favorite conspiracies, well, I've got one, and I've been pretty honest about it. I'm pretty sure that there's alien life out there. I don't think that's a controversial conspiracy at all. I think the odds of the human race being alone in the vast cosmos is infinitesimally small. And I think it's also ridiculous. Now, that said, do I think that aliens have come here? I have no idea. I got no clue. I can't prove it. And so I don't know for sure. I'm certainly open to the possibility. And so there's that. I mean, there's mine. I do absolutely believe that aliens exist. But hey, if you want to share your conspiracy, if you want to make fun of me for mine, that's totally fine. Leave a comment, and I look forward to reading them. All right. Moving on, let's go to Whoopi Goldberg. The latest conservative freakout. Canada isn't a real place. That's funny. The made-up land of snow and ice. All right. Serious stuff, though. We got serious stuff. Conservatives are trying to cancel Whoopi Goldberg. Now, this is after she had apologized for saying some pretty ignorant things about the Holocaust. In fact, on yesterday's episode of The View, she tried to argue that the Holocaust wasn't about race. Take a look.
The Holocaust isn't about race. No, it's not about race.
Ethnicity.
It's,
Well,
no, it's
Jews
about
a different race.
But it's not about race. It's not about
Well,
race.
what is it about?
Because it's about man's inhumanity to man. That's what it's about.
But it's about white supremacy. It's
Well,
about
but
going
it's not-
after
it's
Jews
not about
and
ideal race.
gypsies
It's-
and
but these are two
Romans.
white groups of people.
Well, they
How
go
do we
after black
They
people
didn't see
too.
them as white
And they
people.
went
But you're
after
missing the
homosexuals.
point. You're
Yeah.
missing the point.
Yeah.
The minute you turn it into race, it goes down this alley. Let's talk about it for what it is. It's how people treat each other.
All right, so look, that discussion was in the context of conservatives banning books. So look, they've been talking about the Tennessee School Board banning Maus, a Pulitzer Prize winning graphic novel about the concentration camps during World War II. So look, that's one of the many books that have been targeted for censorship by the right wing. Many because, they claim that it will make white people feel bad. I don't know why, but okay. So now, the segment here is about Whoopi Goldberg and her comments. And I actually think that she is both right and wrong at the same time. So now, is it about race? Yeah, it was about race. Absolutely. The Holocaust was the Nazis trying to exterminate Jewish people and other, what they considered to be undesirables, Roma, the disabled, leftists, etc. The Nazis literally believed that they were members of a superior race and blamed the Jewish people, who they considered to be an inferior race, for all the failings of German society. Literally tried to wipe them out. And so again, so that's where she's obviously stupidly wrong, right? Now, where she's right is possibly that this is a pretty good example too of how you dehumanize people. You dehumanize people, you literally don't consider them human beings, i.e. inferior, right? And that leads to horrific things happening. Allows you to justify doing horrible things against your fellow human beings, okay? And so understand that this is a nuanced conversation, right? Certainly, it is both things. It is, the othering of people, man's inhumanity to man, and an issue of race. And so now, understandably, there's a lot of backlash. Definitely fine. Again, I even have criticized Whoopi Goldberg over this because it was a really, really bad take. And so as a result, she has apologized for that. In fact, she said this on Twitter. Let me pull up that image here. On today's show, this was about 8:15. This was after her Colbert appearance. She said, on today's show, I said the Holocaust is not about race, but about man's inhumanity to man. I should have said it is about both. As Jonathan Greenblatt from the Anti-Defamation League shared, the Holocaust was about the Nazis' systematic annihilation of the Jewish people, who they deemed to be an inferior race. I stand corrected. The Jewish people around the world have always had my support, and that will never waver. I'm sorry for the hurt that I caused. Written with my sincerest apologies, Whoopi Goldberg. Okay. Now look, not only that, but they even brought on Jonathan Greenblatt to The View the next day, on Tuesday. And so he discussed why Goldberg was wrong. And so, look, let me just say, that's the right approach. Yes, if you mess up, if you say something unbelievably stupid, in this case, you apologize for it, sincerely. And I actually do believe that she's sincere about this. And so her apology was welcomed by Jewish leaders. But unfortunately, there were people who were not satisfied with this. And of course, it was the online right-wing community. Because of course. They turned this into an issue of cancel culture. Immediately, the first thing they go to is cancel culture. So now, let me give you an example here. For America tweeted, Gina Carano was fired for saying less than Whoopi Goldberg said in her first, second, and third statements combined. Except that Whoopi Goldberg, when corrected, she did apologize. Gina Carano, and I talked about this, Gina Carano was warned several times by the studio, hey, tone it down a little bit. Stop doing that. Please stop posting those things. We're going to give you a warning. We're going to give you a second warning. We're going to give you a third warning. And we're not going to give you any more warnings, so please stop. After this, you're done. And then she did it again. Because of course, right? Another example gets brought up, Roseanne Barr. In fact, this is Sean, or Shiny Nickel, says, Roseanne Barr gets fired, but not Whoopi. It's called left-wing privilege. Do you remember Roseanne? Do you remember what happened with Roseanne Barr? Roseanne Barr literally blamed racist statements on Valerie Jarrett on Ambien. Oh, yeah, it was the Ambien. I was up at 2 a.m., Ambien, tweeting racist things, and then doubling down. Again, in both of those situations, had they come out immediately and just said, hey, look, yeah, what I said was incredibly stupid. It was dumb. I apologize. It was a very ignorant statement. And then stop doing it. Stop doing it. That's all you had to do. It's just not do that. Apologize and not do it again. And actually learn your lesson. Or hell, at least pretend that you've learned your lesson by not doing it again. But no, they had to keep pushing it and pushing it. Why? It's because, well, look, cancel culture is a big seller on the right wing now. If you, quote unquote, get canceled by the woke mob, then you're a conservative hero and you are sure to get a lot of money and fame and jobs from the right wing. It's that victimhood complex. They love to feed into it. That's why they continue to do it. They do it. All right, so another one. Why are liberals allowed to say and do racist and derogatory things? they're not, because massive backlash, right? Always getting away with it by simply saying, I'm sorry, or I didn't mean it. Whoopi Goldberg said something racist about the Holocaust and is allowed to say, I'm sorry. She should be fired. No, well, the whole reason she's not is because she realized that it was dumb and apologized. That's not how this works. No, and by the way, this applies to everybody. Like, yes, if you say something stupid and wrong, which happens, or factually incorrect, and then you come out, once you have learned, what's real, and you come out and say, boy, was I wrong? I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I was wrong. I said something dumb, and I apologize for it. That's it. That should be the end of it. That's why I'm totally fine. Now, if Whoopi Goldberg had come out today and still doubled down, well, the segment would look very, very different, because I would be criticizing Whoopi Goldberg because what she said was factually incorrect. Again, if you say something dumb or ignorant, which is a person who, by the way, does talk for a living, you're going to get called out and corrected for it. I have no problem with backlash. None at all. I think that's totally fine. I've always been consistent on that. Criticism, backlash, etc. Yes, that's important. Now, on the right, they call that cancel culture. That's what they do. They're like, oh, no. If you criticize me at all for the dumb things that I say, that is cancel. You're trying to cancel me. No, that's literally holding people accountable. That's what that is. Again, if you apologize and you do something and you try to do better, then I don't see that why you would need to be fired or canceled or anything like that. And again, there's a lot of nuance here as well, because it really does depend on what you say. I mean, if you say some of the most horrific things, and you have to look at the context. In her context, Whoopi Goldberg was saying, well, let's talk about this. Let's have a discussion on this. And I think this is important. And she was arguing against banning the book in class, which is what conservatives were trying to do in the first place. But yes, she did get the race thing absolutely wrong. She did. But again, now she knows better. And there you go. And again, this is not me, saying that I like Whoopi Goldberg. I've had a lot of disagreements with her in the past, especially with her takes when it comes to progressive politics. I think that she's, quite disconnected from average, regular working people, progressives and progressive priorities. Totally fine. That to criticize her for that, right? And I do think that she's wrong. But again, no one is saying here in this situation that what she said was acceptable. Nobody defended that at all. It was unacceptable. It required an apology, which was then offered by her and accepted by the aggrieved parties. That's it. The only people calling for her ouster are the people that hated her in the first place, that were looking to do looking for an opportunity to do cancel culture. Now, I want to actually give credit to a conservative for actually talking against this. And so I didn't think that this day would ever happen, but I actually agree with a Newsmax host. Of all people. Here's a tweet by Greg Kelly. Oh, sorry, that's not it. Yes, Whoopi Goldberg was as wrong can be, but I'm getting really sick of cancel culture and the shaming. This crap has to stop. Really, really weird places to capitalize, but okay. We can't make it illegal and unforgivable to make a mistake. That's right out of China. Whoopi's a liberal, but I think she's cool. Look, again, a lot of that stuff is pretty ridiculous, but the overall point is, hey, let's not go in the direction of doing cancel culture. And I agree with that. I actually agree with that. Again, it's one of the very, very few things that I'll ever agree with Greg Kelly on. But hey, yes. Oh, by the way, the whole China thing, of course they have to take shots at China for just like no reason. But look, yes, people make mistakes overall. And, that's going to happen. But if you make a real effort to apologize and you come correct and you learn from it, then I don't see any reason to not let this go. So at the end of the day, Whoopi Goldberg, not guilty. Yes, I know Whoopi Goldberg went hard against progressives. That's why I criticized her. And so that criticism is, again, 100% good faith. And absolutely on point, because she has been massively against progressive policies, Bernie Sanders, AOC, etc. And so her political positions are not good on those things. But I still don't believe in canceling over this, because I actually do think that, honestly, it was a mistake of just being ignorant. And I actually don't believe in cancel culture, believe it or not. Okay. Let's go to Madison Cawthorn. Oh, by the way, I see some of you asking for it. Obama. There we go. Are you happy now? I did it. You're welcome. All right.
All this political violence has happened all throughout 2020. We saw the what they call the Summer of Love, when we had all of our major cities burned to the ground. We had cops killed. We had buildings looted. We had places burned to the ground. And
that was Madison Cawthorn claiming that we had a lot of cities, major cities, that were burnt to the ground in 2020 as a result of the Black Lives Matter protests. Now, that of course apparently came as news to some people, like, the people who lived in those cities, all that. But hey, look, it's not surprising that Madison Cawthorn is saying these things. Now, why do I say that? No, it's given the fact that Cawthorn is facing possible punishment for his role in promoting the protest that eventually led to the riot on January 6th. So now, let me give you an example of what's going on here. So you might have heard that earlier this month, you had 11 North Carolina voters challenging Representative Madison Cawthorn's eligibility to run in the Republican primary for a House seat. Now, according to their complaint, which was filed with the North Carolina State Board of Elections, Cawthorn, they say, is disqualified by Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, which states that no person shall be a member of the House if, having previously taken an oath to support the Constitution as a member of Congress, the person then engaged in insurrection against the Constitution. So that's an old Civil War era, or afterwards, after the Civil War, to try to keep Confederates out of the government, which again makes sense, because if you literally try to insurrect against the United States, you shouldn't be in office. So now, that said, I think as a result of that and all the questions surrounding him when it comes to his role in January 6th, he's going to come out here and make pretty ridiculous and hyperbolic statements and comparisons between what happened on January 6th, which again was rioting, looting, violence against police, and an attempt to overturn the election, as well as supporting the real coup attempt, which was outlined by Peter Navarro in his own book, and Steve Bannon, their Green Bay sweep, of which they had literal fake electors waiting for Mike Pence to refuse to certify, and by the way, this is only a ceremonial role, so you couldn't actually not certify the election. It wouldn't mean that, like, oh no, Donald Trump doesn't have to leave because, Mike Pence refused to certify the election. No, again, doesn't actually mean anything. He just opens the envelope. Nonetheless, they relied on ignorance of Mike Pence's actual role in the entire thing in order to try to cast confusion. And so, look, you get mass confusion, and then you get right-wing media that comes in and just broadcasts, Pence refused to certify the election. Then you get the fake certification documents that were sent into the National Archives. And you had all of these fake electors that were lined up and ready to take the place of the real electors in key swing states to try to basically fake Donald Trump into power again. And so it's the literal fake it till you make it. And that's what it was. Now, the riots themselves, I think that they were basically to scare Mike Pence and other lawmakers into not certifying the election as well, and, allowing those fake electors to do what they're going to do in the middle of the chaos. So, now, if you want to compare that to the overwhelmingly peaceful Black Lives Matter rallies, protests, I think that's hugely disingenuous. Again, 93% peaceful and involved millions of protesters across major U.S. cities. Now, was there violence? Yes. Was there looting? Yeah, that had happened. Nobody's arguing with that. Was there arson? Yeah. Did entire cities burn down? No. No, that's not what happened. Now, look, you had some instances, again, of arson. For example, there was a Wendy's that got burned down. I know. Somebody please think of the poor Wendy's. Now, police have actually indicted 3 people for that arson. And so, okay. Now, Minneapolis. In Minneapolis, there was a police station that was set on fire. Now, we find out later, well, that the person that set that fire happened to have been a Boogaloo boy, 26-year-old Ivan Harrison Hunter, who traveled from, I believe it was Texas, and, in order to join the George Floyd protests. You also had another Boogaloo boy, Stephen Carrillo, who ended up shooting 2 police officers that were standing guard. One of them died from their injuries. Boogaloos. Those are the people that won a civil war in the United States. Now, that's not what Black Lives Matter wanted. Black Lives Matter literally just wanted police to stop shooting black people. And so, understand that there was a lot of opportunists behind a lot of this violence that had happened during the George Floyd protests. There was a church fire in Nashville that was also started by a 3%er. So again, you had agent provocateurs that were involved in some of this violence as well. And police. There were also police that had instigated violence, rounded up not only protesters, but also members of the press. Even with all that, though, did any cities burn down? No, that's not what happened at all. Again, and as far as police are concerned, well, I just mentioned that there was somebody who was killed by police. There was a Boogaloo boy who had shot and killed a police officer, right? But in reality, in 2020, he wants to talk about all the cops being killed. Well, guess what? Guess what was the leading cause of deaths for police officers in the line of duty? COVID-19. COVID-19 killed more cops. 256 out of the 387 reported police deaths in 2020 were from COVID. Oops. man, it's almost like, I don't know, why aren't they out there shooting at COVID? Instead of going after unarmed black people. I mean, come on. Yeah, their biggest, the biggest problem, the biggest killer of police is them not wanting to wear a mask or get a vaccine. Oops. So, look, if that really does show you anything, it shows you how full of shit Madison Cawthorn actually is, and how he only wants to distract you from the fact that he was supporting an insurrection. We saw plenty of footage of cops instigating against clearly nonviolent protesters, which is what I mentioned, yeah. If only cops would comply with the mandates. True. Very true. All right. Let's go to the shredder. Documents requested by the January 6th committee were recently received, but in not so good condition. So now they received these from the National Archives, which had received them from the Trump White House. So now the Washington Post is reporting that some of the records that the Trump administration, following his him leaving office, had sent over some records that were ripped apart and taped back together, according to three people familiar with those records. That's weird. That's very, very strange. Now, apparently, Donald Trump was known for basically taking stuff that he is supposed to keep, supposed to have filed for the National Archives. Instead, he's like, who cares? Who cares? Who cares? Rips them up and then throws them around like confetti. Now, the Post explains that he left records management analysts scurrying around to scotch tape these records, these documents back together. So now, look, normally, again, this would be a ridiculous, fun story. However, there's potential legal problems behind doing this. The Presidential Records Act actually requires the preservation of memos, letters, notes, emails, faxes, and other written communications related to a president's official duties. And by the way, isn't it ironic that the same people that are like, we need to see Hillary's emails, right? We need the record of all the emails, is the same person that's taking their correspondence, and not in emails, of course, but just physical papers, and ripping them right up. I mean, it's ridiculous. But anyway, obviously, Trump didn't give a goddamn and continued to rip up the documents and throw them around, throw them on the floor like a baby. And I'm not kidding either. That's what he would do. He'd just rip things up and let them float onto the floor. Absolute ridiculousness. Now, that said, a lot of them ended up in the National Archives to be turned over later on to the January 6th committee. So now the National Archives on Monday had taken the unusual step of confirming Trump's habit. I don't know why they're calling it a habit. It's not a habit. He's hiding evidence. I mean, how much more clear can you get? Yes, he's hiding evidence. And why? I don't know why. I mean, I can speculate why. But then he's not somebody that really makes a whole lot of sense. He's not a rational person. And so I can see him be like, I don't know, I'm just going to rip things up. Whatever. Don't care. Don't care. I'm going to rip them up. So now, as I said, The National Archives confirmed it, saying in a statement that, yes, records turned over from Trump included paper records that had been torn up. And some of them, by the way, were taped together. Others, not so much. In fact, some of the documents, they say, were not reconstructed at all. So what? They just, like, took, I don't know, shoved them in a bag and then handed them over to the January 6th committee? Like, I don't know. Well, first to the National Archives, and then the bag to the, to the January 6th committee. Here you go. What the hell is this? That's your records. Hey, don't blame us. We didn't shred them. Literally handing over confetti. My God. So now, some of the stuff that, some of the documents that we think might be involved in this, we don't necessarily know because you have to go through and basically now piece everything together, which I'd hate to be that guy. Honestly, I would hate to be that guy. But it's safe to assume that some of these documents might be things that Trump had tried to hide through executive privilege, and therefore, was unable because he no longer has executive privilege because he's no longer president. And so, I don't know, maybe that's why he shredded them. Like, I have executive privilege. Oh, here, take this. Here's my executive privilege. Whatever. I don't know. Maybe I could see that. I could definitely see that happening. I could definitely see that happening. Now, but by the way, that stuff that he tried to assert executive privilege on included diaries, schedules, appointment information, handwritten notes concerning January 6th from White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows. That might be important. Speeches, remarks, and other things. So now look, even by the way, if there's nothing there, if they tape everything back together and find that there was nothing incriminating, which I find to be a laughable concept, but stay with me on this one, okay? Even if they don't find anything incriminating, well, it can still be problematic because what he did was illegal, or could be illegal. According to Stephen Gillerks, a New York University law professor and constitutional scholar, who said that White House documents torn up by Trump are clearly the property of the government under the Presidential Records Act. Quote, so destroying them could be a crime under several statutes that make it a crime to destroy government property if that was the intent of the defendant. A president does not own the records generated by his own administration. Okay. Now, whether anybody goes after him for that, for destroying the documents themselves, I don't know. That's an interesting question, not one that I'm really equipped to answer. But again, it really depends on what's in there and what the committee says and what they actually tried to do. Now, again, there is some things that I would be very interested in, and it appears the committee is also interested in. For example, 4 pages from the records of presidential findings concerning the security of the 2020 election. I think that would be very interesting. 4 pages of a draft executive order on the topic of election integrity. That's another thing. 3 pages of talking points on alleged election irregularities. And 2 pages of a draft text of a presidential speech for the January 6, 2021 Save America March, which ended up turning into the riot. These are documents that Trump probably didn't want anybody else to see. But again, if you don't have executive privilege, well, it's because you're not an executive anymore. And that means all that stuff, well, that's fair game. That's open. Now, earlier today, the New York Times published a report about how former President Donald Trump was attempting to seize voting machines. as part of the effort to steal the 2020 election. Now, according to the report, which follows on an earlier report about a draft executive order that Trump's lawyers had attempted to hide after the fact. So now that draft order would have directed the defense secretary to go around to each of the battleground states and seize voting machines. Now, let's just say right now that that would have been an absolute and utter disaster. So now, first, details. The New York Times, citing 3 people familiar with the matter, reported on Monday that Trump had directed Rudy Giuliani to call the Department of Homeland Security to determine whether or not it could legally take control of voting machines in key states. Now, obviously, you can't. That is not legal. Now, that effort also came amid 2 previously reported attempts, as I mentioned, to seize machines. Trump's outside advisors pressing to have the Defense Department confiscate them, and Trump asking Attorney General William Barr whether the Justice Department could take them. Barr immediately rejected the suggestion, the Times said. Trump's advisors drafted a second version of the executive order, ordering DHS to take control of the voting equipment, according to the Times and CNN. The new account showed that Mr. Trump was more directly involved than previously known in exploring proposals to use national security agencies to seize voting machines, as he grasped unsuccessfully for evidence of fraud that would help him reverse his defeat in the 2020 election, according to people familiar with the episodes. Now, understand how much of a huge overreach that is. That's a literal takeover of of state election. That's what that is. A huge overreach. Power grab. Now, I thought conservatives were supposed to be wary about that stuff. I thought they're like, the federal government coming in and taking control of our elections. No, not over our dead bodies. We're patriots. Well, in this case, the federal government does not oversee elections. It doesn't. Voting machines and most other aspects of U.S. elections are overseen by state and local officials. That's how that works. Okay? Now, in the case of the federal government, they do get involved in certain instances, like civil rights concerns, or violence, or campaign finance law, which theoretically they're supposed to do something about, but they generally don't. So, if the federal government were to come in and steal voting machines, literally take them, well, that would have been a gigantic and incredible amount of federal overreach. The jackbooted thugs, they're coming. They're rolling into polling places like Philadelphia and Atlanta. They're confiscating the machines. Now, you think that would have went over well? Do you think that would have happened? No. That wouldn't have caused some sort of conflict? No, it would have absolutely. And look, I think it would have been a firestorm. You would have had federal agents arguing with local officials, Republican officials even. Now, maybe that's what he was hoping for. I don't know. Maybe it was the whole thing, a distraction. Just give me a distraction so I have some time, right, to figure out how I'm going to try to steal this election. I don't know, but it's pretty scary to think about the implications of how close we actually came to this level of disaster. Oh, and of course, to think that, we were that close to fascist takeover, but didn't go in that direction because of Mike Pence and William Barr. Oof. Oh, that hurts. But again, it's hard to think about. And it's even worse knowing that there were a lot of people who were willing to go along with this. Now, this is actually also related to one of the previous stories that I talked about, and that was that was all the records that he ripped apart involving January 6th and of course, leaving his aides and people who are trying to keep the records according to the law, and had to go and tape them back up. And no wonder he tried to rip up that documentation. I think he was hiding his tracks. I mean, that's my personal opinion. And doing so to try to cling to power in any way he could. And again, through that, we realize that he has had no problems trying to subvert our entire form of government to try to hold on to power. He's an authoritarian, and thank goodness we survived that. But how close were we to the edge? I see we're pretty close. Pretty close. Giving the ignorance, by the way, of the role of the vice president in certification, the propaganda machine of the far right, and the willingness of that same far right to do violence, as well as the inherent distrust in institutions. And I'm not saying that those institutions haven't failed us and haven't earned some of that or a lot of that distrust, especially media. Nonetheless, it just shows you how close we've gotten. And not only that, but we're not even anywhere, there's been no changes to anything. We're back to the status quo, and the status quo is what got us to where we were with Trump in the first place. We're nowhere near out of the woods. We're nowhere near out of the woods. And again, I'm not just talking about Donald Trump running in 2024. Yes, that's going to happen. But it's more than that. It's not only, it's the support that he gets. We have a third of all Republicans that say violence might be necessary to save the republic. But it's not just the base, it's also in Congress. And it's the lack of any changes. And not only that, but the lack of any consequences for the people who supported him. Even the rioters, whom he had just promised to pardon if he gets elected. So, obviously, the republic is still in danger. That danger has not passed. It is still very, very present. We need to wake up and actually make some positive changes to the system in order to not only protect and promote democracy in our own country, but prevent fascist takeover. Yeesh. All right. Let's do the big pharma story real quick here. The new report out showing that despite record profits from the pandemic, pharmaceutical companies still continue to hike their prices up of life-saving medicine while paying lobbyists at the same time to kill any legislation to rein them in. So now, this is according to an article by Common Dreams. They said that major pharmaceutical companies in the US had recently hiked the prices of nearly 870 prescription medications during the first month of 2022, as Republicans and conservative Democrats, flush with cash from lobbyists, continued to block legislation that would be aimed at reining in that system. So now, let me give you some context here. So look, the original version of Build Back Better had a provision in there that was pretty popular with not only the American people, but also progressives and Republicans as well. That pretty much the majority of the American people supported allowing Medicare to negotiate prescription drug prices. So that would have lowered prices for everybody. Now, that would have also caused Big Pharma to lose out on a lot of potential profits, which is why, of course, Big Pharma used their lobbying power, which, by the way, they massively outnumber. The amount of lobbyists per lawmaker, I believe, is about 3. So for every lawmaker, there are 3 lobbyists to that 1. And pharmaceutical companies are by far some of the largest campaign contributors, if not the largest campaign contributors, in Congress. And so it's no surprise that that provision in Build Back Better, along with the rest of the bill, by the way, was just completely destroyed. It's dead. It's never going to pass. It's gone. So now, Let me give you some more details here. This is from the Wall Street Journal. They said over the same period last year, drug makers also raised prices by an average of 4.5% on 893 different drugs. There were large price increases. AmerisourceBergen's Blue Point Laboratories, a seller of generic drugs, more than doubled the price of the cancer chemotherapy drug cisplatin to $30. Oh, but there's more. Excellent Pharmaceuticals raised their price of its generic lisinopril to treat high blood pressure by a total of 536%, going from a range of $6.17 to $549.85, depending on the dosage and package size. Unbelievable. But no, actually totally believable in our system. This is Pharma Bro shit. This is exactly what everyone was trashing Martin Shkreli for doing. And these companies, excellent, apparently they feel emboldened enough to take a common drug, a cheap drug to produce, and to jack it up by 536%. Disgusting. And of course, they're doing it because they can. And maybe they assume they have some goodwill, Big Pharma themselves, because of the life-saving vaccine. But let me just note that on the vaccine, taxpayers already paid for it. We paid for the development. The research on the vaccine, and I'm talking about COVID-19, and generally most, if not all vaccines, were all developed with public money. Then these corporations, the pharmaceutical companies, they come in and they patent troll, and they buy up these patents from the government, and then jack up the prices. And they hold on to these patents and make sure that generic versions cannot be developed in order to, try to stifle competition. That's when that should be the major pushback against the pharmaceutical industry. It's the profit model of greed. It's not the medicines that they make. That's not the problem. The problem is charging all of this money for life-saving medications in order to make a profit. The privatization, the profit margins in our healthcare system, in our pharmaceutical industry, is abhorrent. It's absolutely gross. Now, Senator Bernie Sanders, called that greed out. Here's what he said about this, particularly, quote, "There's something profoundly wrong in America when a company like Exelon can raise the price of generic drugs to treat high blood pressure by 536% to as much as $550. How many more Americans have to die and suffer before Congress has the guts to end this greed?" Well, look, sadly, they're paid not to care. And of course, Bernie Sanders knows this more than anyone, which is why, of course, he's railed against that lobbying, that corporate money in politics, or at least that corporate greed in our healthcare system. So let me give an example of that greed. Representative Scott Peters, Kurt Schrader, and Kathleen Rice, all Democrats, as well as Senator Bob Menendez, guess what they did? They worked to kill any reform when it came to drug prices. So now, look, Republicans, the reason I don't mention Republicans is that they all don't want prescription drug reform. Now, they say they do. Oh, prescription drugs, it's too expensive. I'm going to do something about this. And then all the Republicans vote against legislation that would allow Medicare to negotiate drug prices with pharmaceutical companies. And of course, they do so with the help of the corporate Democrats. And so that's why I'm pointing out the corporate Democrats more than Republicans. Because they, have tried to convince people that no, the Democrats are on the side of the people against this corporate greed. When in reality, again, you've got people like Bob Menendez, Scott Peters, and the rest that are massively in favor of this greed, this corporate greed model. In fact, as Kaiser Health News reported in October, as congressional Democrats worked throughout 2021 to craft drug price reform plan aiming to fulfill one of their long-standing campaign promises, and this has been a promise for a long time, by the way, the pharmaceutical industry delivered the cash to key lawmakers with quote-unquote surgical precision. Scott Peters received the most money of any member of Congress with $63,900 in contributions in the first half of the year. The outlet found next in line was Senator Robert Menendez, who accepted $49,300, the most of any senator this year, despite not facing re-election until 2024. So that was bribe money. There's no other way that no other thing that you can call it. Bribes. We pay you, and you do our bidding. That's exactly what happens. So now, the article also adds, Democrats' effort to cap insulin costs in the U.S. also faced intense opposition from the pharmaceutical industry, as Stat reported last week. Insulin giants Eli Lilly and Novo Nordisk boosted their lobbying spending as Democrats eyed pricing reform. And so, as a result, guess what? We're not getting any reform. There will be no reform. And again, all you have to do to figure out why, this is not a complicated question. No, it's you follow the money. It's always about the money. It's about the lobbying. Look, these companies, they grease the politicians, and guess what? The politicians then will do whatever they want. This is not difficult. Unless you're mainstream media, which apparently thinks that money in politics has no bearing at all on the way a politician votes. Can you imagine that, being so just incredibly brain dead? As to think, oh, no, the senator got all this money, Menendez from the pharmaceutical industry, and then voted down any changes to, make prescription drugs more affordable. I can't figure out why. I don't know, and I don't understand. Oh, why isn't he helping, lower prescription drugs? Or when they talk about Kirsten Sinema and Joe Manchin. Principled mavericks, they called her. They called both of them. No, they're not principled. The only principle they have is making money. Since launching her political career, Kirsten Sinema has, her campaign committee has received more than $500,000 in donations from pharmaceutical companies. Some reports have her receiving even more than that, up to $750,000. No, this is not a lack of, by the way, they always talk about, it's bipartisanship. You got to be more bipartisan, right? No, this isn't a lack of bipartisanship that's the problem. When corporate interests align, there's never a lack of bipartisanship. No, they always come together. They always come together. The only times that they don't is when it comes to help regular people. And the only solution is to remove the money out of our political system. That is the root of evil. You want to eliminate the corruption, you want to drain that swamp, you got to drain the money first. Or else nothing is ever going to change. Okay. That's all I got. Let me, before I go, I want to thank some people for sending in super chats. I'll read a few of those, if I haven't already. Get to that here. Let's see. Michael Norris says, "Hi, regarding your comment yesterday, I realized you were joking, but I tell my students, freedom of speech is not the freedom from being challenged or questioned. No way such malicious myth-truths should be spread." Yeah, I mean, obviously, of course, yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. Freedom of speech is not freedom from consequences or freedom from being challenged. So I absolutely agree. Gabby Mathis, thank you for the very kind $5. Appreciate that. And Daniel Bangle points out how so far Merrick Garland is doing nothing. Is anyone surprised? Just watched a video about Libby, Montana, the only place in the U.S. that actually has Medicare for all. Yes, I was actually, I believe it was Lance from the Surfs that was doing a segment on that as well, that had talked about that. It works. And that's exactly why they don't want it on a national scale. And that's exactly why, by the way, speaking of money, money in politics, and speaking of corruption, this is why, once again, California has tanked their single-payer healthcare plan. So, if you're wondering why I haven't talked about that, it's because there's really nothing new to discuss. It's not going to get passed because you still are always going to have corrupt interests pouring money into that system to crush any sort of reform that threatens their profit margins. Get the money out. That's the only solution. At least the only one that I can see. All right. I just realized that I didn't even open Twitch. What am I doing here? I mean, I have Twitch over in my OBS here, but I didn't have Twitch open. But yeah, thanks for the new follows. Appreciate that. All right, everybody, thank you for joining me. Please like and share the stream if you haven't already. Very important that you do so. Try to have a good night. We'll be back, same time, same place, right here, 4 p.m. Eastern, ish. I'll be honest, ish. All right, so that said, love you all, and remember, change begins with you. Good night, nation. We'll see you tomorrow.
Obama. I have not loved this conversation.
Dumps. Big, massive dumps.
Give me a break.
Mike Pence.
Who's got a hammer?
You're kicking me out the door. You're kicking me out the door.